A frail little thing like you would be the first to die." The Navy SEAL grabbed the 23-year-old nurse by the arm hard enough to bruise, shaking her like a rag doll, while 45 assassins flooded Mercy General Hospital at 2:47 a.m. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't beg. 47 minutes later, that same SEAL stood trembling in a corridor filled with 45 unconscious bodies, and the frail nurse he had mocked was the only one still standing. If this story grabs you the way it grabbed me, hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from, and stay until the end. You won't believe what happens next. Mira Ashford clocked in for her shift at exactly 10:47 p.m., 3 hours before the world she knew would shatter into pieces. She walked through the employee entrance of Mercy General Hospital the same way she had for the past 14 months, head slightly bowed shoulders, curved inward footsteps, so quiet they barely registered on the tile floor. Her scrubs were plain blue, the cheapest brand from the hospital supply room, wrinkled in places she hadn't bothered to iron. No jewelry, no makeup. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple elastic band that had lost its stretch weeks ago. The security guard at the checkpoint, a heavy-set man named Marcus, with a badge he polished obsessively, didn't even look up from his phone as she passed. She was invisible. And that was exactly how she wanted it. The ICU night shift was skeleton crew 4 nurses covering 32 beds, most of them occupied by patients who required constant monitoring but rarely woke. The hum of ventilators and the rhythmic beeping of heart monitors created a symphony of survival that Mira found strangely comforting. She was reviewing patient charts at the nurses' station when her supervisor, Helen, a tired woman in her 60s who had seen everything twice, approached with an unusual expression. "Ashford, you're being reassigned." Mira looked up. "To where? Room 508, VIP patient. Federal marshals brought him in this afternoon, but they pulled out an hour ago. Something about jurisdictional issues." Helen shook her head. "Politics. The patient still needs monitoring, and you're the only one I trust not to gossip." "What's wrong with him?" Helen lowered her voice. "Gunshot wound to the abdomen. Surgery went well, but he's critical. And Mira..." She paused, something flickering in her eyes that might have been concern. "Don't ask him questions. Don't talk to anyone about him. The men who brought him in, they weren't regular marshals. You understand?" Mira nodded slowly. "I understand." She gathered her supplies and walked toward the east wing, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the linoleum. Room 508 was at the end of a long corridor separated from the main ICU by a set of heavy double doors that required keycard access. The patient was unconscious when she entered, his face pale against the white sheets monitors displaying vitals that teetered on the edge of stability. He was maybe 50 years old, with the weathered features of someone who had lived a hard life. A faded tattoo on his forearm showed military insignia she didn't recognize. Mira checked his IV drip, adjusted his oxygen flow, and settled into the vinyl chair beside his bed. The room was quiet, except for the mechanical rhythm of life support. She pulled out a worn paperback novel and began to read. For 47 minutes, nothing happened. Then the lights went red. The emergency klaxon started low, almost like a distant whale song, before rising to a piercing shriek that vibrated through the walls. Red warning lights pulsed in the corridor, casting everything in shades of blood and shadow. Mira's pager buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. Code Black. Armed intruders. Shelter in place. All non-essential personnel evacuate to basement bunker. She stood slowly walking to the small window in the door that looked out onto the corridor. Empty. The lights continued to flash, painting the walls in alternating strokes of crimson and darkness. Her pager buzzed again. Multiple hostiles confirmed. Hospital lockdown initiated. Do not engage. Await further instructions. Mira looked back at the unconscious patient. He couldn't be moved. His condition was too critical, disconnecting him from the monitors, and life support would kill him within minutes. She made her decision without hesitation. She wasn't leaving. The door to room 508 burst open 7 minutes later. The man who entered was built like a weapon. Broad shoulders, thick neck, arms covered in tactical tattoos that disappeared under rolled-up sleeves. He moved with the coiled tension of a predator, his eyes scanning the room in practiced sweeps, before landing on Mira with an expression of pure contempt. Dominic Reyes, former Navy SEAL, current head of hospital security, a man who wore his military service like armor and treated everyone else like civilians who needed protection or removal. "What the hell are you still doing here?" His voice was a low growl, barely controlled. Mira didn't flinch. "My patient is critical. He can't be moved." "Your patient?" Dominic laughed, a harsh bark that echoed off the walls. "Listen, sweetheart. There are 45 professional killers infiltrating this building right now. 45. You know what that means? It means this room is about to become a shooting gallery and you—" He jabbed a finger at her. "You're the target practice." "I'm not leaving him." Dominic's expression shifted from contempt to something uglier. He stepped closer, using his size to intimidate, looming over her slight frame. "Do you have any idea what's happening out there? These aren't street thugs with stolen handguns. These are contractors, ex-military, mercenaries who've toppled governments for breakfast. And you think you're going to stop them with what, a stethoscope, a bedpan?" Mira met his eyes without wavering. "My assignment is to monitor this patient. That assignment hasn't changed." "Your assignment." Dominic grabbed her upper arm, his grip deliberately painful fingers digging into the muscle until she should have cried out. But she didn't. She didn't even tense. She just looked at his hand on her arm, with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Let go of me," she said quietly. "Or what?" He squeezed tighter, watching her face for fear for tears, for any sign of the weakness he was certain existed beneath her calm exterior. "You'll report me to HR, file a complaint. By morning you'll be dead, and no one will even remember your name." The door opened again, and Dr. Harrison Webb strode in like he owned the building, which in a sense, he did. As hospital director, Webb controlled budgets, personnel, and most importantly, the flow of donor money that kept Mercy General running. He was in his mid-50s, with perfectly styled gray hair and the kind of tailored suit that cost more than most nurses made in a month. Behind him came Marcus, the security guard from the entrance, his hand resting on his taser with exaggerated importance, and trailing them both was Vanessa Chen, a nursing aide, whose designer scrubs and immaculate makeup stood in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around them. Webb's eyes swept the room and landed on Mira with visible annoyance. "Why is she still here? I ordered all non-essential personnel to evacuate." "She's being stubborn," Dominic said, still gripping her arm. "Thinks she's going to guard the patient." Webb laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "Guard the patient with what? Look at her Rias. She's a child, a nobody. She'd fold the moment a real threat walked through that door." Mira's voice remained steady. "The patient is critical and cannot be moved. My presence is medically necessary." "Medically necessary." Webb pulled out his phone, dialing a number and putting it on speaker. "Yes, this is Webb. I'm in the VIP room with a personnel situation. One of the night nurses, Ashford, I think, refuses to evacuate. Yes, the quiet one. No tactical value whatsoever." He paused, listening. "Understood. We'll proceed without her. If she becomes collateral damage, that's her choice. We're not risking resources on a liability." He hung up and looked at Mira with cold, bureaucratic finality. "You heard that your value to this institution is 0. If those killers breach this room, no one is coming to save you. You're already written off." Marcus stepped forward, puffing up his chest. Maybe I should drag her out personally, for her own protection, of course. He smirked. You know what the problem is with girls like you? You think being quiet makes you mysterious. It doesn't. It makes you invisible. Forgettable. When those assassins come through that door, they won't even register you as a target. You'll just be noise, background. Vanessa circled Mira, slowly examining her plain scrubs, her bare face, her cheap hair tie. God, look at you. No effort at all. You come to work looking like you don't care about yourself, and you expect us to care about you. When this is over, no one's going to remember you existed. The mousy nurse who whispered her coffee orders and died alone in a room no one bothered to check. She reached out and flicked the elastic holding Mira's hair, watching it snap weakly against her scalp. Pathetic. Dominic finally released Mira's arm, shoving her backward against the medical supply counter. The metal edge dug into her spine, but she didn't cry out. She didn't even wince. You've got 5 minutes to change your mind, he said. After that, we seal this wing, and you're on your own. No backup, no rescue, no hope. He leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. A frail little thing like you, they'll break you in half without even trying. You'll be screaming for help, but no one will come. Because no one cares about a nobody. Dr. Webb checked his watch impatiently. We've wasted enough time. The bunker is secure. Let's go. They filed out of the room one by one, Dominic last pausing at the door to give Mira one final look of contempt. Your funeral, sweetheart. Funeral. The door clicked shut. The magnetic lock engaged with a sound like a coffin closing. And Mira Ashford was alone. For exactly 3 seconds, nothing changed. Then her posture shifted. The slight curve in her shoulders disappeared. Her spine straightened vertebra by vertebra until she stood with the rigid precision of a soldier at attention. Her breathing slowed, deepened, became measured and controlled. Her eyes, which had remained downcast and passive throughout the entire confrontation, now lifted and swept the room with the cold calculation of a predator assessing a hunting ground. The frightened nurse was gone. What remained was something else entirely. Mira moved to the door panel and keyed in an override code that shouldn't have worked for anyone below administrator level. The small screen flashed green. She had access to the hospital's central systems. Her fingers flew across the interface, pulling up security cameras, HVAC controls, medical supply inventories, and power grid schematics. Within seconds, she had a complete picture of the building, every entrance, every exit, every choke point. And she could see them. 45 signatures moving through the building in coordinated patterns. Professional. Disciplined. They communicated in hand signals, moved in tactical formations, and cleared each corridor with the efficiency of men who had done this 1,000 times before. They were heading for the East Wing. They were heading for her. Mira smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. She pulled a small canvas bag from beneath her scrubs, the bag she always carried, the one no one ever noticed, because it looked like it contained nothing more threatening than a packed lunch and a change of clothes. Inside was a kit that would have made a CIA operative nervous. Chemical compounds, pressure sensors, modified medical syringes, a palm-sized tablet preloaded with exploits for the hospital's network, and a single laminated card that she placed face down on the counter. She would reveal what she was when the time was right. But first, she had work to do. Down in the basement bunker, Dominic Reyes monitored the security feeds with growing unease. The assassins had breached the first floor 7 minutes ago, taking out 3 security guards without triggering a single alarm. They moved like ghosts, efficient, lethal, and utterly professional. His radio crackled with fragmented reports. Team Alpha contact lost. East stairwell compromised. Oh God, they're coming through the... Then silence. Dominic switched camera feeds, his jaw tightening as he watched the bodies pile up. These weren't street criminals. These were Tier 1 operators, the kind of men governments hired when they needed problems to disappear permanently. And they were all converging on one location. Room 508. That nurse is dead meat, Marcus muttered, peering over Dominic's shoulder at the screens. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then they'll have the witness, and this whole nightmare will be over. Dr. Webb paced behind them, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, I understand the liability implications. We'll cooperate fully with the investigation. The nurse was warned. She made her choice. Vanessa sat in the corner, filing her nails with forced casualness, though her hands trembled slightly. I told her. I literally told her she was invisible. She should have listened. Dominic said nothing. He was watching camera 7, which covered the corridor outside room 508. 3 assassins had just entered the frame. They were the best of the best, Dominic could tell by their equipment, their movement, their absolute silence. They wore full tactical gear faces, hidden behind balaclavas, silenced weapons raised and ready. The point man paused at the door to room 508, checking his equipment. He gave a hand signal. His partners stacked up behind him. They breached the door with a shaped charge that blew the lock clean off the frame. The assassins swept into the room in a perfect 3-man formation, weapons up fingers on triggers, and found nothing. The patient's bed was empty. Monitors beeped steadily, but the man they'd come to kill was gone. In his place lay a pillow shaped vaguely like a human form beneath the sheets. The point man spun, checking corners, but the room was completely empty. Target relocated, he whispered into his radio. Sweep the wing. She can't have taken him far. He took 1 step toward the door, and then the lights went out. Not just in the room, throughout the entire East Wing. The emergency backup power kicked in half a second later, but that half second was enough. In the darkness, something moved. When the red emergency lights flickered back on, the point man was on the floor convulsing. His partners were backing away from him, weapons raised, but there was nothing to shoot. No target, no enemy. Just their dying teammate and the faint, sweet smell of something chemical in the air. Gas! One of them shouted, reaching for his mask. He was too slow. His body went rigid, then limp, crashing to the floor beside his teammate. The third assassin made it 2 steps toward the corridor before his legs gave out, dumping him face first onto the tile. 3 men down in under 4 seconds, and no one had even seen her. Dominic stared at the screen, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. What the hell just happened? How did she? He rewound the footage, playing it back in slow motion. There. A flicker of shadow near the ventilation grate. The sound of something mechanical engaging the hospital's HVAC system, redirecting airflow. And then a faint mist, almost invisible, drifting from the ceiling vents. She didn't kill them, he breathed. She didn't even touch them. She just changed the air. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. That's impossible. She's a nurse. She probably doesn't even know how to work the thermostat. But Dominic wasn't listening anymore. He was watching camera 12, which covered the maintenance corridor on the 3rd floor. A dozen more assassins were converging on that location, moving in tight formation, weapons ready. They had clearly received word about the 3-man team going dark, and they were proceeding with extreme caution. They swept each room methodically. They checked every corner, every shadow, every potential hiding spot. They were exactly where they were supposed to be, which is why they never saw it coming. The fire doors at both ends of the corridor slammed shut simultaneously, magnetic locks engaging with a sound like thunder. The assassins spun weapons raised, but there was nothing to shoot, just empty corridor and sealed exits. Then the sprinklers activated, but it wasn't water that rained down from the ceiling. Dominic watched in horror as 12 highly trained killers dropped to their knees, clutching their throats, foam bubbling from their lips. Whatever was coming from those sprinklers, it was far more effective than mere water. 15 down, he whispered. 15 in 2 minutes. How is this possible? Dr. Webb stopped pacing his phone, forgotten in his hand. What are you talking about? What's happening up there? That nurse, Dominic said slowly. That little nobody nurse we left behind. She's killing them. All of them, without a single weapon. Vanessa stopped filing her nails. That's ridiculous. She's barely 100 pounds soaking wet. She looked like she'd cry if you raised your voice. Marcus nodded vigorously. She literally whispers her coffee orders. I've seen her. There's no way. Look at the screens, Dominic roared, spinning to face them. Look at the bodies. 18. Dead in the last 3 minutes, and the only person in that wing is the woman we left to die. They looked. And for the first time that night, they saw what Mira Ashford really was. The assassin team leader, Juno Crane, received the status updates with growing fury. 18 men dead. No contact with the target. No identification of the threat. She had been in this business for 15 years. She had killed senators, silenced witnesses in maximum security prisons, and eliminated targets in broad daylight in the middle of crowded cities. She had never lost 18 operators in a single engagement, especially not to a ghost. Full gear, she ordered her remaining team. Respirators, tactical visors, everything. Whatever she's using, we counter it. 27 assassins acknowledged. They moved as one unit, now abandoning their spread formation to concentrate force. No more small teams, no more individual sweeps. They would flood the East Wing with overwhelming numbers and crush whatever resistance remained. Juno herself took point, her custom respirator filtering the air, her thermal visor scanning for heat signatures. She was the best of the best handpicked for this mission because of her record of perfect execution. Tonight, that record would remain intact. Or so she believed. They swept through the East Wing floor by floor, room by room. Bodies littered the corridors, their own men dead or unconscious, expressions frozen in shock and terror. No bullet wounds, one of her team reported, examining a corpse. No trauma at all. It's like they just stopped living. Chemical agent, Juno said. Aerosolized. She's using the hospital's ventilation system against us. Masks stay on at all times. They found room 508 empty. The patient gone, the monitor still beeping at an empty bed. She moved him, Juno muttered. She's playing with us. Where would she take him? Her second-in-command asked. He's critically wounded. She can't go far. Juno considered. The girl nurse, whatever she was, had proven resourceful beyond expectation. But she was still one person against 27 professionals. The numbers were insurmountable. Radiology, Juno decided. She'll try to hide him somewhere with heavy equipment, thinking it'll give her cover. Split into 3 teams. Converge from all sides. No escape routes. No survivors. They moved out with deadly precision and walked directly into the trap Mira had spent the last 10 minutes preparing. The MRI suite was 3 floors down, accessible only by a single corridor that passed through the hospital's central imaging department. Mira had chosen it deliberately, not for the hiding places, but for what it contained. The Siemens Magnetum Prisma MRI scanner was a medical marvel capable of generating magnetic fields strong enough to see inside the human brain. It was also in the wrong hands, capable of something far more destructive. Mira crouched behind the control console, the patient safely hidden in the supply closet behind a wall of lead shielding, sedated enough to keep him quiet but alive. Her eyes tracked the thermal signatures on her borrowed tablet, 27 contacts converging on her position from 3 directions. She smiled again. That cold, predatory smile. "Come on," she whispered. "Just a little closer." The first team breached the radiology department with textbook efficiency, sweeping the dark corridors, with tactical lights checking each room before advancing to the next. They found nothing. Empty examination rooms. Unused equipment. The faint hum of machines on standby. They pushed forward, approaching the MRI suite at the end of the hall. The point man put his hand on the door, and Mira flipped a switch. The MRI machine spun up with a sound like a jet engine. Magnetic fields expanding outward in invisible waves. The assassins barely had time to register what was happening before their weapons' steel-iron alloy were ripped from their hands and slammed into the bore with devastating force. But that wasn't the trap. The trap was what happened next. Men wearing tactical vests with metal plates found themselves yanked off their feet, pulled across the room by magnetic forces they couldn't see and couldn't fight. They slammed into walls pinned by invisible hands, their own equipment turned against them. Screams echoed through the corridors. And then Mira walked out of the shadows. She didn't look like a nurse anymore. She moved like a dancer, no, like a predator, each step precise and purposeful. In her hand was a single syringe, the needle glinting in the emergency lights. The men pinned to those walls could only watch as she approached, their weapons useless, their strength meaningless against the fundamental forces of physics. "You came to kill a man who can't defend himself," Mira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came with guns and numbers and arrogance. You thought this would be easy." She reached the first assassin pinned spread eagle against a filing cabinet, his face contorted with the effort of fighting the magnetic pull. "It should have been easy," she continued, "but you made one mistake." She pressed the syringe against his neck. "You underestimated the nurse." He convulsed once and went limp. 8 more followed in the next 60 seconds. 9 down in a minute. 27 to go. And the night was still young. Juno Crane heard the screams through her radio and felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years of contract killing. Fear. "Team Bravo report," she barked into her comm. "Bravo lead respond." Static. Then a wet, gurgling sound that might have been someone trying to speak with paralyzed vocal cords. Then nothing. 9 more signatures had vanished from her tactical display in the span of 60 seconds. That brought the total losses to 27 operators, more than half her force eliminated by a single target who, according to the intelligence briefing, was a 23-year-old night shift nurse with no combat training or tactical background. Someone had made a catastrophic error. "All units fall back to Rally Point Echo," Juno commanded. "Regroup and reassess. We're dealing with a professional." "Copy that," her second-in-command, Victor, responded. "But boss, what kind of professional takes down 27 contractors without firing a shot?" Juno didn't answer because she didn't have one. In the basement bunker, Dominic Reyes was having a complete psychological breakdown. He stood frozen in front of the security monitors, watching the impossible unfold in real time. Camera after camera showed the same thing: his elite assassins, the best killers money could buy, dropping like flies in a pesticide cloud. And at the center of it all, moving through the chaos like a ghost, was the woman he had grabbed by the arm and called dead weight. "This isn't happening," he muttered. "This can't be happening." Dr. Webb had stopped pacing. He stood behind Dominic now, his face ashen, watching the screens with the expression of a man whose entire worldview was collapsing. "She's killing them," Webb whispered. "That girl that she's systematically eliminating a professional hit squad." 27, Dominic said numbly. 27 confirmed down, and she hasn't even broken a sweat. Marcus had retreated to the corner of the bunker, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. His hand still rested on his taser, but it trembled violently. "Maybe we should call for backup. Real backup. Police, FBI, National Guard. And tell them what?" Vanessa's voice was shrill on the edge of hysteria. "That we locked a nurse in a room to die and now she's single-handedly destroying a small army. They'll think we're insane." "We need to get out of here," Marcus said. "Find another exit, get to the parking structure, and go where?" Dominic spun to face him. "There are still 18 assassins in this building, all of them now actively hunting for whoever is killing their friends. You want to walk out into that—" The bunker fell silent. On the screens, Mira Ashford continued her methodical work. She had moved to the hospital's central pharmacy, a vault-like room filled with every medication known to modern medicine. In the wrong hands, it was a warehouse of death. In her hands, it was an arsenal. The remaining assassins had regrouped near the hospital cafeteria, a large open space that offered good sight lines and multiple defensive positions. Juno had chosen it specifically because it eliminated the choke points that had cost her so many men. She stood at the center of her remaining team, 18 professionals, who had survived countless operations around the world. They were rattled, she could see it in their eyes, but they were still deadly. "Listen to me," Juno said, her voice cutting through the tension. "She's good. Maybe the best I've ever seen. But she's still one person and we are 18. She's been using environmental weapons gas magnets, the building's systems. That means she's not heavily armed. That means in a straight fight, we win." "How do we force a straight fight?" Victor asked. "She controls the entire hospital." Juno smiled coldly. "We take away her toys, cut the power to the whole building. No HVAC, no security systems, no electronic locks. Force her into the open. The backup generators. We destroy them too. Every single one. Then we flood the building with thermal scopes and night vision. She won't be able to hide, won't be able to run, won't be able to use any of her tricks." Juno checked her weapon. "And when we find her, we put so many bullets in her body that dental records won't be enough for identification." The team moved out with renewed purpose. They didn't know that Mira had been listening to every word through the hospital's intercom system. She sat in the pharmacy surrounded by bottles and vials, her fingers moving with practiced precision as she prepared her next round of surprises. The assassins thought they were adapting. They thought they were taking the initiative. They were wrong. Mira had anticipated this move hours ago. The moment she'd seen the hit team's equipment, she'd known they would eventually try to neutralize the building's systems. It was the logical, tactical response, which is exactly why she'd planned for it. She pulled out her tablet and began typing commands. If they wanted darkness, she would give them darkness, but not the kind they expected. The first generator went down at exactly 3:47 a.m. Victor's team had reached the basement utility room, setting shaped charges on the primary power unit. The explosion was controlled precise, just enough force to permanently disable the generator without causing structural damage to the building. The lights flickered once, twice, then went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting the corridors in dim red glow. Then those died too, as Victor's second team destroyed the backup generator on the hospital's roof. Total darkness. "Perfect," Juno's voice crackled through the radio. "Thermal scopes on. Begin systematic sweep from the ground floor up. Check every room, every closet, every ventilation shaft. She's got nowhere to hide now." The assassins moved out in pairs, their thermal imaging equipment painting the world in shades of heat and cold. They could see through walls, detect body heat from 50 meters away, track movement in absolute darkness. They were confident again. That confidence lasted approximately 4 minutes. Victor was leading the sweep of the 3rd floor when his thermal scope picked up a heat signature in the room ahead. Human-sized stationary positioned near the window. He signaled his partner, and they stacked up on the door. 3, 2, 1. They breached hard and fast, weapons up, fingers on triggers. The heat signature was a bag of warmed saline solution hung from an IV stand. Victor had just enough time to register the deception before he heard a soft click behind him. "Looking for me." He spun, weapon rising, but something cold pressed against his neck, a needle sliding through skin with surgical precision. "Motor function will cease in 3 seconds, Mira said conversationally. "Respiratory function in 7. You'll be conscious the entire time but completely paralyzed. Don't worry, I'll administer the antidote before you suffocate. Probably." Victor's body went rigid, then collapsed. His partner tried to fire, but Mira was already moving a blur of motion that seemed to defy physics. She ducked under his weapon, her hand striking precise points on his arm that made his fingers go numb. The gun clattered to the floor. "You're wondering how I knew you'd come here," she said, driving an elbow into his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping. "It's simple. I left heat signatures in 6 different locations. Statistical probability said you'd find this 1 second. I had a 68% chance of being right." She pressed another syringe into his neck. "I was right." He fell beside his partner, paralyzed, but aware eyes tracking her as she collected their weapons and communication equipment. "Tell your boss something when you wake up," Mira said, crouching beside them. "Tell her that I'm not hiding. I'm not running. I'm hunting. And I always catch my prey." She disappeared into the darkness before either man could process her words. Juno received Victor's distress beacon 4 minutes later. By the time she reached his position, both men were unconscious, arranged neatly side by side on the floor, with their weapons placed deliberately out of reach. A handwritten note was pinned to Victor's tactical vest. Juno read it 3 times, her hands shaking with rage. 15 down, 18 to go. Your move." She crumpled the note in her fist. "All units converge on my position immediately. We're changing tactics." The remaining assassins gathered in the 3rd floor corridor, 16 hardened killers plus Juno herself. They were scared now. She could see it in their body language, hear it in their breathing. Fear was spreading like a virus through her team. "She wants us to scatter," Juno said. "That's how she's been picking us off, isolating small groups and using the environment against them. So we don't scatter anymore. We move as one unit, 16 guns all pointing outward. No blind spots, no weak points. And if she attacks, then 16 of us open fire at once, and even if she's the ghost of a special operations legend, she dies." Juno checked her weapon again. "We're ending this. Now, move out." They advanced in a tight formation, boots thudding in unison on the linoleum floor. Thermal scopes swept every direction. Communications maintained constant status updates. They were a mobile fortress bristling with weapons and hostility. Mira watched them from the ventilation shaft above their heads. She had been tracking their movements for the past 7 minutes, moving through the hospital's maintenance passages with the fluid ease of someone who had memorized every blueprint, every service tunnel, every forgotten crawl space. The assassins thought they were hunting her. They had no idea she was directly above them, close enough to hear their labored breathing, watching their heat signatures cluster together like sheep sensing a wolf. Sheep were easier to manage in herds. She pulled out a small canister modified from a hospital nebulizer and positioned it above the center of their formation. The compound inside was her own design, synthesized from common hospital supplies, a neuromuscular paralytic that would saturate the air and drop everyone within a 10-meter radius in seconds. One button, 16 targets. Simple. But something made her hesitate. Through the grate, she could hear Juno talking to her team. "When this is over," the assassin leader was saying, "when we've completed the contract and eliminated the target, I want each of you to take a vacation. Real vacation, beaches, mountains, whatever. Because after tonight, we've all earned it." "You think we're going to make it through tonight?" someone asked. "After what she's done to us?" "I know we will," Juno said. "Because we're professionals. And professionals don't lose to nurses." Mira smiled in the darkness. She pressed the button. The canister dropped through the grate and hit the floor with a soft metallic clink. 16 heads swiveled toward the sound. 16 weapons rose toward the ceiling. And then the gas erupted. It was over in seconds. Bodies crumpled like marionettes with cut strings, weapons clattering to the floor in a discordant symphony of metal on tile. Juno tried to hold her breath, tried to run, but the compound worked on skin contact as well as inhalation. 3 steps, 4, and then her legs gave out, dumping her face first onto the linoleum. She was still conscious barely, as Mira dropped from the ventilation shaft and landed with feline grace beside her. "Professionals don't lose to nurses," Mira repeated, crouching beside Juno's paralyzed form. "You're right about that. But I'm not a nurse. I never was." She reached into her scrubs and pulled out a laminated card, holding it in front of Juno's frozen eyes. The assassin's pupils dilated with recognition and terror. "Department of Asymmetric Biowarfare," Mira read aloud. "Tier 1 asset, protocol architect, specialization environmental elimination and non-kinetic neutralization." She tucked the card back into her scrubs. "I was placed in this hospital 14 months ago to establish a deep cover identity and monitor a surveillance network. The federal witness you came to kill, he's not a witness. He's my handler, the man who assigned me this mission." Mira's voice hardened. "You weren't sent to eliminate a target. You were sent to test me, and you failed." Juno's eyes widened with the horrible realization. The contract, the intelligence, the entire operation. It had all been a setup. Someone had sent 45 assassins to die, and Juno had led them straight into the trap. "Who?" she managed to whisper through paralyzed lips. "Who sent us?" Mira stood looking down at the fallen assassin with something that might have been pity. "That's above your pay grade," she said. "But don't worry. By tomorrow morning, your organization won't exist anymore. Every name, every bank account, every safe house, I've been compiling data for 14 months. Tonight was just the final test to prove the network was worth dismantling." She stepped over Juno's body and began walking toward the stairs. "Someone will find you in about 3 hours," she called over her shoulder. "The paralytic will wear off by then. I suggest you use the time to contemplate your career choices." Juno could only watch as the woman who had destroyed her entire team disappeared into the darkness. In the basement bunker, chaos had descended. The monitors had gone dark when the power was cut, leaving Dominic Webb, Marcus, and Vanessa in near total darkness. Only a single battery-powered emergency light remained, casting harsh shadows across their terrified faces. "We need to get out of here," Marcus said for the 15th time. "Right now, before she comes for us." "She won't come for us," Webb insisted, though his voice shook. "We're not threats, we're just hospital staff. She's after the assassins." "We left her to die," Vanessa shrieked. "We mocked her, humiliated her, and locked her in a room with a death squad. You think she's just going to forget that?" Dominic said nothing. He was staring at the darkened monitors, his mind replaying every moment of his interaction with Mira Ashford. The way she hadn't flinched when he grabbed her arm. The way her pulse had remained steady when he threatened her life. The way she had looked at his hand, not with fear, but with the clinical detachment of someone cataloging a future target. He had been so certain of her weakness, so confident in his superiority, and she had let him believe it. She was testing us, he said slowly. The whole time. She was seeing how we would behave when we thought she was helpless. She was evaluating us. Evaluating us for what? Webb demanded. The bunker door creaked. 4 heads snapped toward the sound. The heavy steel door designed to withstand explosions and armed assault swung open slowly, its magnetic locks apparently disabled from an outside terminal. Mira Ashford stood in the doorway. She wasn't holding a weapon. She didn't need one. The 44 bodies scattered throughout the hospital above them were testament to that. She looked exactly the same as she had hours ago, plain scrub, simple ponytail, bare face. But everything about her presence had changed. The air itself seemed to contract around her, charged with a lethality that made the bunker's occupants press themselves against the far wall. "You left me to die," Mira said quietly. Her voice was calm, conversational, almost friendly. "You said I was a liability, a nobody, collateral damage." "Please," Webb started. "We didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing." Mira stepped into the bunker, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft click. "You made calculations. You weighed my life against your convenience and found it worthless. That's not ignorance. That's cruelty." She turned to Dominic, who was trembling visibly now, all his military bravado stripped away to reveal the frightened core beneath. "You put your hands on me," she said. "You squeezed my arm until it bruised. You told me I was weak, breakable, that I would die screaming and no one would care." "I was wrong." Dominic's voice cracked. "I was so wrong. Please, I have a family." "So did the nurses in the pediatric ward who hid under their desks when your assassins swept through," Mira interrupted. "They were terrified. Some of them are still crying in locked rooms right now. But you weren't thinking about them when you abandoned me, were you? You were thinking about yourself." The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Mira reached into her pocket. All 4 of them flinched, expecting a weapon, a syringe, something deadly. She pulled out a phone. "Lucky for you," she said. "Killing you was never part of my mission, but destroying your lives." She smiled, that cold, predatory smile that haunted all their nightmares. "That's absolutely within parameters." She pressed a button on the phone. "What? What did you just do?" Webb stammered. "I transmitted the security footage from tonight to every law enforcement agency in the state," Mira said. "Every news organization, every social media platform. The footage shows your staff bullying and abandoning hospital personnel during a crisis. It shows your security chief physically assaulting a nurse. It shows the hospital director calling a federal investigation to report a personnel issue instead of a mass casualty event." She tucked the phone back into her pocket. "By sunrise, you'll all be famous. Not the kind of famous you wanted, but the kind you earned." She turned and walked toward the door. "Wait," Vanessa cried out. "You can't just who are you? Really?" Mira paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder. "I'm the woman you thought was invisible," she said. "The nobody you dismissed without a second thought. The mouse you expected to hide under the bed." She opened the door. "Turns out the mouse had teeth." The door closed behind her. And in the bunker, 4 people who had thought themselves powerful began to understand just how small they truly were. Mira was halfway to the stairwell when her tablet vibrated with an alert that made her blood run cold. 44 confirmed neutralizations. 1 target unaccounted for. She stopped walking, her mind racing through the possibilities. She had tracked 45 heat signatures when the operation began. She had eliminated 44 with absolute certainty. The math didn't lie. Someone was still out there. And whoever it was had been smart enough to avoid every trap, every ambush, every environmental weapon she had deployed throughout the hospital. That meant they were good. Very good. Mira pulled up the security feeds on her tablet, scanning through camera after camera. The corridors were littered with unconscious bodies, her handiwork from the past 2 hours. Emergency lights cast everything in crimson shadows. But there was no movement, no heat signatures, no sign of the missing assassin. Unless they knew how to mask their thermal signature. Unless they had been watching her the entire time, learning her methods, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Mira's hand moved instinctively to the syringe in her pocket. She had been so focused on the main force that she hadn't considered the possibility of a backup operative, someone outside the normal chain of command, someone with skills that matched or exceeded her own. A ghost, hunting a ghost. She needed to find the patient. If the last assassin was still active, they would be heading for the same target. The witness in the supply closet. Her handler. The man whose survival was the entire point of tonight's operation. Mira moved quickly but cautiously, now her senses hyper-aware of every shadow, every sound, every subtle shift in the air. The hospital felt different somehow, charged with a tension that hadn't been there before. She was no longer the only predator in the building. She reached the radiology department and slipped through the door to the supply closet where she had hidden the patient. The lead shielding had protected him from the MRI's magnetic field and masked his heat signature from thermal imaging. The door was already open. Mira's heart stopped. She pushed through weapon, raised a scalpel she had grabbed from a surgical tray, better than nothing, and found the closet empty. The gurney was there, the monitors were there, the IV stand was there. But the patient was gone. A voice spoke from behind her. Looking for something. Mira spun the scalpel, slashing through air, but the figure in the doorway caught her wrist with casual precision and twisted. The blade clattered to the floor. Before she could counter, she felt cold metal press against her temple. "Don't," the voice said. "You're fast. I'm faster. And I've been doing this since before you were born." Mira forced herself to be still, her mind cataloging everything about her attacker. Female, late 40s, maybe early 50s, moved with the fluid economy of someone who had trained for decades. Voice calm, controlled, almost amused. "You're the 45th, Mira said. "I prefer to think of myself as the insurance policy." The woman stepped around to face Mira, keeping the gun trained on her forehead. The other 44 were fodder. Cannonballs fired at a fortress to test its defenses. I was sent to observe, learn, and complete the mission if they failed. Mira studied her opponent. Gray hair cut short and practical. Eyes the color of steel. No visible emotion, just cold professional assessment. This was a woman who had killed more people than Mira had years on Earth. "You've been watching me," Mira said. "From the moment you started rewiring that oxygen sensor. Impressive work, by the way. The liquid nitrogen trick was particularly creative." The woman tilted her head slightly. "They told me you were good. They undersold you considerably." "Who's they?" "The same people who sent 45 contractors to kill one federal witness." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "The same people who created you. The department isn't the only organization that breeds specialists, little girl. We've been around much longer." Mira's blood went cold. "The consortium. So you know the name. Good. That saves me an explanation." The woman gestured with her gun toward the door. "Walk. Slowly. We're going to retrieve the witness, and then we're leaving this hospital together. Try anything clever, and I put a bullet through your spine. You'll live, but you'll never walk again. Understood. Mira nodded slowly and began walking. Her mind raced through options. The woman, call her Gray for the hair, was maintaining perfect distance too far to grab too close to miss. Her gun hand was rock steady, betraying decades of training. Rushing her would be suicide. But Mira hadn't survived this long by being predictable. "The patient isn't a witness," Mira said as they walked. "He's my handler. You know that, don't you?" "I know exactly who he is," Gray replied. "Marcus Chen, 15 years with the department, ran 7 deep cover operations before transitioning to handler duties, currently running assets in 12 major cities." She paused. "Including you. Then you know killing him won't accomplish anything. His death has already been planned for. Contingencies are in place. The network continues regardless." "Of course it does. We're not trying to destroy the network." Gray's voice held a note of something that might have been respect. "We're trying to acquire it. Chen knows the identities of every asset in the Western Hemisphere. That information is worth more than any single operation." Mira felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't an assassination. It was a capture mission. They wanted to extract Chen's knowledge, and they didn't care how many people died in the process. "He'll never talk," Mira said. "Everyone talks eventually. The human body has limits. The human mind has breaking points. We have techniques that have been refined over centuries." Gray's tone was matter-of-fact clinical. "He'll give us everything within 72 hours. Then we'll kill him, painlessly, as a professional courtesy." They had reached the central stairwell. Gray gestured for Mira to open the door. "Down," she ordered. "Basement level. There's an access tunnel that leads to the parking structure. Our extraction team is waiting." Mira's hand touched the door handle. In approximately 30 seconds, she would lose any chance of turning this situation around. Once they reached the tunnel, once they had transportation, once they left the hospital, it was over. Chen would be taken. The network would be compromised. Everything she had worked for would be destroyed. She had one chance. The door. Mira had spent 14 months memorizing every system in this hospital. She knew the weight of every door, the resistance of every hinge, the exact amount of force required to move them. This particular door had a weak spring mechanism that she had reported to maintenance 3 months ago. It had never been fixed. She pulled the door open with exactly the right amount of force to make it swing back on its own, not fast enough to be threatening, not slow enough to be suspicious, just enough to create a 2-second window where Gray's line of fire would be partially obstructed. Mira dropped. The gun fired the bullet, passing through the space where her head had been a millisecond earlier. She rolled, came up with the scalpel she had palmed from her sleeve, and threw it in one fluid motion. Gray deflected it with her forearm. A bloody gash opened across her wrist, but she kept her grip on the gun and fired again. Mira was already moving, using the door as cover, her hand finding the fire alarm pull station mounted on the wall. She yanked it. The sprinklers activated throughout the entire building, drenching everything in seconds. More importantly, the electromagnetic locks on every fire door in the hospital disengaged simultaneously, a safety feature designed to allow evacuation during emergencies. Mira heard Gray curse as multiple doors around them swung open, creating chaos and cover. She sprinted down the stairs, water streaming down her face, her footsteps masked by the thundering cascade from above. Gray followed, firing blindly into the stairwell. Bullets sparked off metal railings. One grazed Mira's shoulder, leaving a burning line of pain, but she didn't slow down. 2 floors, 1 floor, basement level. She burst through the bottom door and found herself in the hospital's maintenance corridor, a maze of pipes, electrical conduits, and storage rooms that stretched beneath the entire building. And standing in the middle of the corridor, looking confused and terrified, was Marcus Chen. He was still in his hospital gown, vui lines trailing from his arm, one hand pressed against his surgical wound. Someone had moved him, probably one of the assassins, before Mira had neutralized them, and left him here when the operation went sideways. "Mira." His voice was weak, barely audible over the sound of water rushing through pipes above them. "What's happening? Where are we? No time to explain." Mira grabbed his arm and started pulling him toward the far end of the corridor. "There's one more. She's right behind us. We need to move." "I can barely walk." "Then lean on me, but we move now, or we die." They had made it maybe 30 feet when Gray appeared at the other end of the corridor. Her gun was up. Her aim was steady. Water dripped from her gray hair, but her expression was completely calm. "End of the line," she said. "Step away from the asset, little girl. You've impressed me tonight. There's no shame in knowing when you're beaten." Mira positioned herself between Gray and Chen, her body shielding his. "You'll have to go through me." "That was always the plan." Gray's finger tightened on the trigger. "I respect what you've accomplished. 44 kills without a single shot fired. It's remarkable. But you're out of tricks now. No ventilation systems to weaponize. No magnets to play with. Just you, me, and a bullet that's about to end your story." Mira's hand slipped into her pocket. "You're wrong about one thing," she said. "What's that? I'm never out of tricks." She pulled out a small device, a modified insulin pump she had grabbed from the pharmacy earlier, and pressed the button. Nothing visible happened. Gray smiled. "Was that supposed to do something? Check your gun." Gray's smile faltered. She looked down at her weapon and saw the fine mist coating its surface, a mist that was already reacting with the metal corroding it at an accelerated rate. The compound had been designed to neutralize firearms in hostage situations, eating through the precise mechanisms that made them function. She tried to fire anyway. The gun clicked uselessly. Gray threw the ruined weapon aside and pulled a knife from her boot, a wicked serrated blade that gleamed even in the dim light. "Old school it is," she said, and charged. The fight that followed was unlike anything Mira had ever experienced. Gray was faster than she looked, stronger than she had any right to be, and utterly ruthless. Her knife slashed and stabbed in patterns that seemed to anticipate Mira's every move. Within seconds, Mira was bleeding from cuts on her arms, her legs, her ribs. But Mira had something Gray didn't. 14 months of studying this hospital, memorizing every corner, every surface, every potential weapon. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it at Gray's head. Gray ducked, but the distraction bought Mira enough time to kick open a supply closet door. She grabbed a handful of something from the shelf, cleaning supplies, industrial strength, and threw them at Gray's face. The older woman screamed as the chemicals hit her eyes, temporarily blinding her. Mira pressed the advantage, driving her shoulder into Gray's midsection and slamming her against the wall. But Gray wasn't done. Even half-blind, she caught Mira's arm and twisted, using her own momentum against her. Mira felt her shoulder wrench, felt the knife blade slice across her back, felt blood soaking through her scrubs. They crashed to the floor together, grappling, fighting for control of the knife. Gray was on top, her weight pressing down the blade, inching toward Mira's throat. "You're good," Gray hissed through clenched teeth. "But I've been killing people longer than you've been alive. This is how it ends." The knife was an inch from Mira's jugular. Half an inch. Then a metal IV pole swung out of nowhere and connected with Gray's skull, with a sound like a church bell. The assassin collapsed sideways, unconscious, before she hit the floor. Marcus Chen stood over her, swaying on his feet, the bloody IV pole clutched in his trembling hands. His face was pale as paper, and fresh blood was seeping through his hospital gown, but his eyes were clear. "Couldn't let her kill my best asset," he wheezed. "Bad for performance reviews." Mira lay on the floor, gasping for breath, every inch of her body screaming with pain. She looked up at her handler, the man she had been sent to protect the man she had assumed was helpless, and started to laugh. It hurt. Everything hurt. But she couldn't stop. "You're supposed to be unconscious," she said. "I'm supposed to be a lot of things." Chen dropped the pole and slid down the wall, clutching his wound. "Right now I'm supposed to be dead. Thanks for preventing that, by the way." Mira sat up slowly, wincing at the movement. "We need to secure her. She mentioned an extraction team in the parking structure." "Already called it in?" Chen held up a phone, one of the assassin's phones, Mira realized. "Local PD is en route. FBI too. The parking structure is being surrounded as we speak." Mira stared at him. "You were awake the whole time." "Not the whole time, just the last hour or so." Chen's lips curved into a weak smile. "You were doing fine without my help. Didn't want to get in your way. You could have warned me about the 45th. I didn't know about her. The consortium keeps their insurance policies very secret. Even we didn't have intel." He looked at the unconscious woman on the floor. Helena Vance, if that's really who she is. One of the best they have. You're lucky to be alive. Luck had nothing to do with it. No, Chen agreed. It didn't. He met her eyes with an expression that held genuine respect. "You passed Mira, with flying colors. Whatever they throw at you next, whatever missions they assign, you're ready. I've never seen anyone neutralize 45 hostiles solo. You're going to be legendary." Mira didn't respond. She was looking at her hands, covered in blood, some hers, some not, and thinking about the people she had killed tonight. They were assassins. They were trying to murder an innocent man. They had earned their fate. But still. "How many more operations like this?" she asked quietly. "How many more nights of killing people who were just following orders?" Chen's expression softened. "That's not a question I can answer for you. Everyone in this line of work has to find their own peace with what we do. Some never do. Some find reasons that make it bearable." He paused. "What's yours?" Mira thought about the nurses in the pediatric ward hiding under their desks, while assassins swept the building. She thought about the patients in their beds, vulnerable and helpless, trusting that someone would protect them. She thought about the people who couldn't protect themselves. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "Because there are monsters in this world, and if people like me don't stop them, no one will." Chen nodded slowly. "That's as good a reason as any. Better than most." He groaned and pressed harder on his wound. "Now please tell me there's a working phone nearby. I think I'm about to pass out again, and I'd prefer to do it after medical help is on the way." Mira stood ignoring the screaming protest of her injured body and offered him her hand. "Come on," she said. "Let's get you patched up. The night's almost over." Then she helped him to his feet, and together they began the long walk toward the surface, leaving 45 unconscious assassins, and one very dangerous woman in their wake. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to filter through the hospital windows when they finally reached the lobby. And waiting for them there, surrounded by a phalanx of men in expensive suits who moved with the terrifying silence of absolute power, was the one person Mira had never expected to see tonight. Her husband. Nathaniel Ashford didn't look like a killer. He looked like the kind of man who owned buildings, who moved markets with a phone call, who dined with presidents and dictators with equal ease. His suit probably cost more than most people made in a year. His shoes were handmade Italian leather. His watch was the kind that didn't have a price tag, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. But Mira knew the truth behind the polished exterior. She had married him 3 years ago in a ceremony that had been orchestrated by the department as part of her deep cover identity. She had expected a business arrangement, a paper marriage that would provide her with access to circles she could never penetrate on her own. What she hadn't expected was to fall in love with him. Nathaniel walked through the carnage of the hospital lobby without looking down at the unconscious bodies being loaded onto stretchers. His eyes found Mira immediately tracking her injuries with an intensity that made the armed men around him shift nervously. "You're hurt," he said. "Not a question." "Flesh wounds." Mira's voice was steady despite the blood soaking through her scrubs. "Nothing that won't heal." Nathaniel reached her in 3 long strides and cupped her face in his hands, tilting it toward the light filtering through the shattered windows. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, but his eyes were cold fire. "Who did this to you?" 45 assassins. The consortium." Something flickered in Nathaniel's expression, recognition, anger, and something darker that Mira had only seen a handful of times in their marriage. "Helena Vance," he said quietly. "She's here. Basement level. Unconscious. Chen hit her with an IV pole." For a moment, Nathaniel's composure cracked. He almost smiled. Almost. "Marcus always was resourceful?" Then his expression hardened again. "The consortium made a mistake tonight. A very serious mistake." "They were testing me," Mira said, "using their entire contractor network as cannon fodder to evaluate my capabilities." "I know." Nathaniel's voice dropped to a register that made the nearby FBI agents unconsciously step backward. "They also violated the Accords, attacked a protected asset on American soil, attempted to capture a department handler." His hands dropped from her face, but he didn't step back. "By morning, every consortium safehouse in the Western Hemisphere will be ash, every bank account frozen, every operative exposed." Mira stared at him. "You can do that. I can do considerably more than that." Nathaniel finally allowed himself a small, cold smile. "The consortium has been a thorn in our side for decades. They've been waiting for them to make an unforced error. Tonight they didn't just make one, they made 45. Chen limped forward, supported by 2 paramedics who looked terrified to be touching him. "Nathaniel, good to see you." "Marcus." Nathaniel nodded once. "You look terrible." "I've had better nights." Chen winced as the paramedics lowered him onto a stretcher. "Your wife saved my life. Multiple times. She's everything we hoped she would be, and more." "I'm aware." Nathaniel's hand found Mira's, his fingers interlacing with hers. "She's been exceeding expectations since the day I met her." Mira felt heat rise to her cheeks, an absurd reaction given everything she had survived in the past few hours. She had killed 44 people and fought the consortium's best assassin to a standstill. She shouldn't be blushing because her husband complimented her. But she was. The moment was interrupted by a commotion near the elevator bank. 4 people were being escorted out by federal agents: Dominic Reyes, Dr. Harrison Webb, Marcus, the security guard, and Vanessa, the nursing aide. They looked broken. Dominic's hands were cuffed in front of him, his earlier swagger completely gone. His eyes were hollow, his face pale, his body trembling with each step. When he saw Mira standing in the lobby flanked by armed men and obviously in command of the situation, he stopped walking. "You," he whispered, "you're—" "I'm the frail nurse you left to die," Mira said calmly. "The dead weight. The liability you said would be screaming for help while no one came." Dominic's legs seemed to give out. The agents had to hold him upright. Dr. Webb was faring no better. His perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled and stained with what might have been his own vomit. He kept muttering under his breath the same phrase over and over. "She was just a nurse. She was just a nurse." Vanessa was crying, her mascara running in dark streams down her cheeks. All her earlier cruelty had dissolved into pathetic sobbing. When she saw Mira, she tried to lunge toward her, but the agents held her back. "Please," Vanessa begged. "Please, I didn't mean any of it. I was scared. I just wanted to fit in. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Mira looked at her for a long moment, at the woman who had flicked her hair elastic and called her pathetic, who had said she would die alone and unnoticed. "You're right," Mira said finally. "You were scared. And when you were scared, you chose to be cruel to someone you thought was weaker than you. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." She turned away, dismissing Vanessa with a finality that was more devastating than any verbal response could have been. Marcus, the security guard, was the only one who remained silent. He shuffled past with his head bowed, not even attempting to make eye contact. His polished badge, the one he had been so proud of, had already been confiscated. Nathaniel watched them go with an expression of cold satisfaction. "Their lives are over," he said quietly. "The footage has already gone viral. By noon, they'll be the most hated people in America. By tomorrow, they'll be unemployable. By next week, they'll be testifying before congressional committees about hospital security failures." "Is that enough?" Mira asked. Nathaniel considered the question. "Is it enough for you?" Mira thought about it. She thought about the way Dominic had grabbed her arm, the way Webb had called her expendable, the way Vanessa had mocked her appearance and predicted her death. "No," she said, "but it's a start." She expected Nathaniel to argue to counsel mercy or restraint. Instead, he simply nodded. "Then we'll make sure it's not the end." He squeezed her hand gently. "But first you need medical attention. And then you need sleep. The reckoning can wait a few hours." Mira was about to respond when a new figure emerged from the crowd of federal agents and medical personnel. A woman in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, dressed in a charcoal suit that managed to look both elegant and governmental. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to announce their presence, the kind of person who entered rooms and immediately became the center of gravity. Director Catherine Wells, head of the department. Everyone in the lobby seemed to unconsciously straighten as she approached. Even Nathaniel's men shifted to attention. "Asset Ashford," Wells said, stopping in front of Mira. Her voice was crisp, efficient, utterly devoid of warmth. "Report." Mira's training kicked in automatically. 45 hostile operatives neutralized. Primary asset Marcus Chen secured. Secondary target Helena Vance captured. No civilian casualties. No compromise of cover identity or department operations. Wells nodded once her expression revealing nothing. "Impressive. Your performance tonight exceeded all projections. The analysts will be studying this operation for years." She paused, something flickering in her cold eyes. "You also violated 17 protocols, improvised 12 unauthorized weapons, and caused approximately $4 million in damage to hospital infrastructure. The situation required adaptive responses." Obviously, Wells's lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile Mira had ever seen from her. "Which is why I'm here personally. We need to discuss your future." Nathaniel stepped forward, his protective instincts obviously engaged. "Whatever you're planning to discuss, it can wait until she's received medical treatment and rest." "I'm afraid it cannot." Wells turned her cool gaze on him. "Mr. Ashford, I understand your concern for your wife, but the events of tonight have triggered a cascade of consequences that cannot be postponed. The consortium is already moving to contain the damage. If we don't act within the next 6 hours, we lose our advantage." "Then act. You have an entire agency at your disposal." "I do, but none of them are her." Wells looked back at Mira. "You just single-handedly dismantled the consortium's best assassination team. You captured their top operative. You've proven yourself capable of things that our most experienced agents couldn't accomplish with full tactical support. Her voice dropped. I'm not here to debrief you, Asset Ashford. I'm here to recruit you. Mira felt Nathaniel's hand tighten around hers. Recruit her for what? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. The next phase. Wells pulled out a tablet and handed it to Mira. On the screen was a face, Helena Vance, the woman who had nearly killed her in the basement. Vance was carrying something when she infiltrated the hospital, something she was supposed to deliver to the consortium's leadership after capturing Chen. Mira scrolled through the files on the tablet. Documents, financial records, operational plans, and at the bottom a list of names, 12 names, each one accompanied by a photo and a dossier. These are department assets, Mira said slowly. Deep cover operatives. Correct. The consortium has somehow obtained the identities of our 12 most valuable embedded agents. If this information reaches their leadership, those agents will be dead within 24 hours. Wells's voice was flat, clinical. We need to intercept the delivery. We need to eliminate the threat. And we need someone who has already proven they can operate independently in impossible situations. You want me to go after the consortium leadership. I want you to destroy them. Wells met her eyes without flinching. Tonight you were a nurse who survived an attack. Tomorrow, you can be the weapon that ends a war that's been fought in shadows for 50 years. Mira looked at the tablet, at the 12 faces of agents she had never met, but who were now marked for death. They were like her people, who had sacrificed normal lives to protect others who operated in darkness so that ordinary people could live in light. They were her brothers and sisters in arms, and they would die if she did nothing. How long do I have? She asked. 6 hours until the information reaches consortium headquarters. After that, there's nothing we can do. Nathaniel pulled Mira aside, his face a mask of barely controlled emotion. You don't have to do this. You've already done enough. Let someone else take the mission. There is no one else. Mira touched his face gently. You heard her. I'm the only one who's proven capable. You're injured. You haven't slept in over 24 hours. You just fought 45 assassins and nearly died. This is suicide. It's my job. Mira smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. It's what I was trained for, what I was born for. You were born to be my wife. Nathaniel's voice cracked slightly. You were born to grow old with me, to build a life together, to be more than just a weapon someone points at enemies. For a moment, Mira saw something she rarely glimpsed in her husband: vulnerability, fear, the desperate hope of a man who had found something precious and was terrified of losing it. She pulled him close, resting her forehead against his. I will come back, she whispered. I promise. You can't promise that. No one can promise that. Then I promise to try, with everything I have. She pulled back and looked into his eyes. But those 12 people, they're someone's husband, someone's wife, someone's child. They trusted the department to protect them. I can't let them die because I was too tired or too scared to act. Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly the fear in his eyes transformed into something else, pride, acceptance, and a love so fierce it was almost painful to witness. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. My wife is about to assault the consortium's primary headquarters with 6 hours of preparation, multiple injuries, and no sleep. Nathaniel's voice hardened. If you think I'm letting you do that alone, you don't know me at all. Mira opened her mouth to argue, but Wells interrupted. Actually, Mr. Ashford's participation would be beneficial. She consulted her tablet. The consortium leadership meets at a private estate in the Hamptons, heavily guarded and completely off the grid. However, the estate belongs to Victor Crane, Helena Vance's brother, and one of your company's major shareholders." Nathaniel's expression shifted. "You want me to use my business relationship to get us inside. I want you to walk through the front door while the guards are looking at you, and I want your wife to slip in through the back while no one is watching." Wells allowed herself a thin smile. The consortium has spent decades building walls against government agencies. They never thought to build walls against billionaires. Mira looked at her husband, seeing him in a new light. All those business dinners, all those board meetings, all those seemingly boring corporate events, they hadn't just been building a cover identity for her. They had been building access to places no agent could ever reach. They had been building this moment. "You knew," she said quietly. "All along. You knew we might need this eventually." "I suspected." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "When the department approached me 3 years ago about a cover marriage for one of their assets, I did my research. I learned about the consortium, about the shadow war being fought behind the scenes of polite society. I made sure to position myself where I could be useful when the time came. So this whole marriage was real." Nathaniel caught her hand and pressed it to his chest over his heart. "Every moment of it. I may have started with strategic calculations, but I fell in love with you the moment you corrected my understanding of Byzantine political structures at that charity dinner." He smiled softly. "You were the first person in 20 years who treated me like a person instead of a portfolio." Mira's throat tightened. All this time, she had thought she was the one hiding secrets, maintaining a cover, playing a role. She had never realized her husband was doing exactly the same thing. They were both spies protecting each other while pretending to be normal. "We're going to have a very long conversation after this is over," she said. "I look forward to it." Nathaniel released her hand and turned to Wells. "What do we need to do?" Wells handed them each a secure phone. "Transportation is waiting on the roof. You'll receive full mission briefing en route. The consortium leadership meeting begins in 5 hours. You need to be inside before it starts." Mira took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few hours pressing down on her, the pain from her wounds, the exhaustion in her bones, the lingering adrenaline that was slowly fading into something dangerously close to collapse. But she pushed it all aside. 12 lives hung in the balance. 12 people who had trusted the department to keep them safe. 12 families who didn't know their loved ones might not come home. She had been one of those people once. A young woman with exceptional skills recruited into a world of shadows and secrets promised that her sacrifices would matter. Tonight, she would prove they did. "Let's go," she said. Nathaniel took her hand, and together they walked toward the stairs that led to the roof. Behind them, the sun was rising over Chicago, painting the shattered windows of Mercy General Hospital in shades of gold and crimson. It was the dawn of a new day, and for the consortium, it would be their last. The helicopter touched down on the private helipad of the Crane estate at exactly 11:47 a.m., less than 4 hours after Mira had walked out of Mercy General Hospital covered in blood that wasn't entirely her own. Nathaniel stepped out first, adjusting his tie with the casual confidence of a man who owned half the city. He looked every inch the billionaire investor, arriving for a routine business meeting, not a man who was about to help his wife dismantle a century-old criminal organization. Mira followed 30 seconds later, but not through the same door. She had exited the helicopter through the maintenance hatch during the descent, dropping onto the estate's eastern perimeter, while the guards were focused on Nathaniel's arrival. Her wounds had been hastily treated during the flight, butterfly bandages, medical tape, and enough painkillers to drop a horse, but she could feel every cut, every bruise, every strained muscle screaming in protest as she moved through the shadows. She ignored them all. In her ear, Wells's voice crackled through the secure comm. "Asset Ashford, you have 43 minutes until the leadership meeting begins. The list of agent identities will be presented at that meeting. You must intercept it before then." Understood. Mira's voice was barely a whisper. "What's my entry point?" "Service entrance, northeast corner. Security rotation creates a 12-second window every 4 minutes. Next window in 90 seconds. Mira moved. Her body protested every step, but she had trained for this, trained to push through pain, through exhaustion, through the screaming voice in her head that told her she should be in a hospital bed, not infiltrating an enemy stronghold. The service entrance was exactly where Wells had indicated. Mira counted down the seconds, watching the guard patrol pass by, and slipped through the door with 3 seconds to spare. Inside the estate was a maze of corridors, staff passages, and hidden rooms that the public never saw. Mira navigated it from memory. She had spent the entire helicopter ride studying the blueprints that Wells had provided, burning every detail into her brain. "Nathaniel's status," she whispered. His voice came back immediately smooth and calm, despite the danger. "Just entered the main house. Victor Crane is greeting me personally. Apparently he's very eager to discuss our quarterly projections. Keep him occupied. I need at least 20 minutes. I can give you 30. The man loves talking about himself." Mira allowed herself a small smile as she continued deeper into the estate. The consortium's leadership meeting was being held in a converted wine cellar beneath the main house, a secure room with reinforced walls, signal jammers, and a single entrance guarded by 4 of their best operatives. But every fortress had a weakness, and this one's weakness was the ventilation system. Mira found the access shaft behind a false panel in the kitchen storage room exactly where the blueprints had indicated. She pulled herself up into the narrow passage, ignoring the way the metal edges scraped against her already damaged skin, and began crawling toward the meeting room. The voices reached her before she reached the grate. Absolutely unacceptable losses. 45 operatives, including Helena Vance. Our entire Eastern Seaboard network decimated in a single night. The target was supposed to be a simple extraction. 1 federal witness minimal security routine operation. Clearly our intelligence was flawed. The question is how we respond. Mira positioned herself above the grate and looked down. 12 people sat around a circular table, the consortium's ruling council. She recognized several faces from the dossiers Wells had provided. Arms dealers, corrupt politicians, intelligence brokers, and at the head of the table, Victor Crane himself. He was Helena Vance's brother, but they looked nothing alike. Where Helena was cold and predatory, Victor was warm and charming, with the easy smile of a man who had never been refused anything in his life. He was also, according to Department Intelligence, personally responsible for the deaths of over 200 people. "The response is simple," Victor said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "We implement the contingency we've been preparing for months. We burn the department's network to the ground." He held up a flash drive. "This contains the identities of 12 deep cover assets, their most valuable operatives. Within 24 hours, all 12 will be dead. Within 48 hours, we begin Phase 2, eliminating their handler network. Within 72 hours, the department will cease to exist as a functional organization." Murmurs of approval rippled around the table. Mira's hand moved to the canister at her belt, the same type of compound she had used in the hospital modified for faster dispersal. 1 drop through the grate, and everyone in that room would be unconscious in seconds. But the flash drive would be contaminated. The data might be destroyed. And those 12 agents would remain at risk. She needed a different approach. "There's one problem with your plan," a woman at the far end of the table said. "The operative who destroyed our team last night. The nurse. We still don't know who she really is." Helena's preliminary report indicated department training, possibly Tier 1 classification. Another council member added, "If she's still active, she could interfere with our operation." Victor smiled coldly. "Helena is being transported to our secondary facility as we speak. Once she wakes up, she'll tell us everything she learned about this mysterious nurse, and then we'll add her to our list of targets. And if she comes for us before then, one operative against the entire consortium." Victor laughed. "Even if she's the best the department has, she's still just one person. We have resources, manpower, and infrastructure that spans 3 continents. She can't possibly—" The lights went out. Total darkness descended on the room, broken only by the emergency lights that flickered to life 3 seconds later, casting everything in dim red glow. Victor shot to his feet. "What's happening? Security!" No response. The door to the wine cellar burst open and 4 guards stumbled through, the same guards who had been protecting the entrance. They were conscious but barely functional, their movements uncoordinated, their eyes glazed. "Neurotoxin," one of them slurred. "In the ventilation, can't—" He collapsed. The council members scrambled for weapons, for exits, for anything that could protect them. But the door was the only way in or out, and the guards were blocking it with their unconscious bodies. Then, a figure dropped from the ventilation grate. Mira landed in a crouch at the center of the table, scattering papers and overturning glasses. She looked like death itself, scrubs still stained with blood, bandages visible beneath torn fabric eyes, burning with an intensity that made hardened killers take involuntary steps backward. "Victor Crane," she said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Victor recovered faster than his colleagues, his charm replaced by cold calculation. "You're the nurse, the one who killed 45 of my best people." 44. Your sister is still alive. For now. How did you find us? How did you get past security?" Mira smiled, that predatory smile that had become familiar over the course of the night. "Your sister told me everything I needed to know. She was very talkative once I explained the alternatives." It was a lie. Helena Vance hadn't said a word. But Victor didn't need to know that. "The flash drive," Mira continued, extending her hand. "Give it to me, and this ends peacefully. Refuse, and I do to you what I did to your contractors." Victor glanced at the council members around him, 12 of the most dangerous people in the criminal underworld, all of them armed, all of them staring at the young woman who had appeared from nowhere and was demanding their surrender. "You're bluffing," he said. "You're injured, exhausted, and outnumbered 12-1. Whatever tricks you used at the hospital won't work here." "You're right," Mira admitted. "I am injured, I am exhausted, and I am outnumbered." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small remote. "But I'm also the person who spent the last 3 hours rigging this estate with enough explosives to level a city block. This button activates them all." Victor's face went pale. "You're lying." "Am I?" Mira tilted her head slightly. "Your security chief reported mysterious equipment malfunctions throughout the estate this morning. Your communications array went down twice. Your backup generators experienced unexplained power fluctuations." She smiled. "Those weren't malfunctions, Victor. Those were me preparing the battlefield while you were distracted by my husband's quarterly projections." The council members exchanged nervous glances. "She's one person," a man to Victor's right said. "Even if she's telling the truth about the explosives, she can't take all of us." "You're right," Mira agreed. "I probably can't. But here's the thing, I don't need to." She pressed a button on her comm. "Nathaniel. Now." The ceiling exploded. Not with fire or shrapnel, but with bodies, department operatives rappelling through the shattered skylights, weapons drawn, covering every exit. They moved with the same fluid precision Mira had displayed all night, overwhelming the Council's defenses before anyone could react. Victor lunged for Mira, a knife appearing in his hand, but she was faster. She caught his wrist twisted and drove him face first into the table. The flash drive clattered from his pocket. Mira picked it up and tucked it into her scrubs. "The difference between you and me," she said, pressing his face harder into the wood, "is that I never work alone. I just let you think I did." Within 60 seconds, every council member was restrained. Within 2 minutes, department technicians were securing the estate's servers, downloading decades of consortium operations data. Within 5 minutes, the war that had been fought in shadows for half a century was effectively over. Victor Crane was the last to be led away. His hands cuffed his empire, crumbling around him. He stopped in front of Mira, his eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "The consortium has resources you can't imagine. Safe houses, sleeper cells, contingency plans." "Had," Mira corrected him. "Past tense. While you were meeting in this room, department teams were hitting every location on your network simultaneously. By the time you reach a holding facility, there won't be a consortium left to rebuild." Victor's face twisted with impotent rage. "Who are you? Really? What gives you the right to destroy everything we've built?" Mira leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "I'm a nurse," she said. "I heal the things I want to keep alive, and I sterilize the things that threaten them." She straightened. "Your organization threatened 12 innocent people. It threatened my handler. It threatened my marriage." Her eyes hardened. "It threatened me, and that was your mistake." She nodded to the agents holding him, and they dragged Victor Crane away. Nathaniel found her standing in the wine cellar 5 minutes later, surrounded by the chaos of a successful operation. He was still wearing his business suit, though it was considerably more rumpled than it had been that morning. "You're bleeding again," he said, nodding toward the fresh red stains on her bandages. "I'll heal." "You need a hospital." "I need coffee." Mira managed a tired smile. "And about a week of sleep. But first I need to debrief with Wells and confirm that all 12 agents are secure." Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, holding her gently to avoid aggravating her wounds. "You were incredible," he murmured against her hair. "Terrifying, but incredible." "I had help. You had me, talking about quarterly projections for 3 hours while you single-handedly dismantled a criminal empire." He pulled back to look at her. "We make a good team." "We do." Mira touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. About my training, my missions, You told me what you could. And you came back alive." Nathaniel's voice softened. "That's all that matters." Wells approached them, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Acid Ashford, the mission is complete. All 12 agents have been notified and extracted. The consortium leadership is in custody. The organization's infrastructure is being systematically dismantled as we speak. Casualties. On our side, 3 wounded, none critical. On theirs," Wells almost smiled, "considerably more, but all non-lethal as per your request." Mira nodded. She had killed enough for 1 lifetime. If she could accomplish her missions without adding to the body count, she would. "What happens now?" she asked. Wells was quiet for a moment. "That depends on you. After tonight, your cover identity is compromised beyond repair. Mira Ashford, night shift nurse at Mercy General Hospital, no longer exists. We need to create a new legend for you, a new mission, a new life." Mira looked at Nathaniel, then back at Wells. "And if I don't want a new mission, if I want to stop?" The question hung in the air. It was a question no department asset had ever asked, not because they didn't want to, but because they knew the answer would always be no. But Wells surprised her. "Then you stop," the director said quietly. "You've done more in one night than most operatives do in a career. You've proven your value beyond any doubt, and you've earned the right to choose your own future." Mira felt Nathaniel's hand tighten around hers. "I'm not saying I want to stop completely," she said slowly, "but I need time to heal, to process, to figure out who I am when I'm not pretending to be someone else." Wells nodded. "Take all the time you need. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, we'll be here." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Asset Ashford, Mira, I've never seen anyone do what you did tonight. You should be proud." She walked away, leaving Mira and Nathaniel alone in the ruins of the consortium's power. "So," Nathaniel said, after a long silence, "what now?" Mira leaned into him, feeling the exhaustion finally catching up to her. The adrenaline was fading, the pain was returning, and the weight of everything she had done was beginning to settle on her shoulders. But she was alive. Nathaniel was alive. And somewhere out there, 12 agents who had been marked for death were going home to their families. "Now," she said, "we go home. We sleep for approximately 100 years, and then we figure out what comes next. Together." Mira looked up at her husband, the man she had married for a mission, loved despite herself, and fought beside when the world was falling apart. "Together," she confirmed. "Always." They walked out of the estate hand in hand, leaving the chaos behind them. 6 months later, Mira Ashford stood at the podium of the department's training academy facing a room full of new recruits. She was no longer the invisible nurse who had clocked in for a routine night shift. She was a legend, a cautionary tale, and now a teacher. The scars from that night had faded, but they hadn't disappeared. She wore them as reminders of what she had survived and what she was capable of. "You've all heard the stories," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. "About the nurse who took down 45 assassins without firing a shot. About the woman who destroyed a century-old criminal organization in a single night." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Those stories are true, but they're not the lesson I'm here to teach you." She stepped out from behind the podium, walking among the recruits, meeting their eyes one by one. "The lesson is this: the most dangerous weapon in any situation is not a gun, not a bomb, not even the environment you can weaponize. It's your mind. It's your ability to think when everyone around you is panicking. It's your willingness to be underestimated, to be dismissed, to be written off as a nobody, and then use that invisibility as your greatest advantage." She stopped in front of a young woman in the front row, 23 years old, plain-faced, the kind of person others looked through without seeing. "They will call you weak," Mira said softly. "They will call you invisible. They will assume you're not a threat because you don't look like what they expect. Let them. Let them believe whatever they want. And when the moment comes, show them exactly how wrong they were." The young woman nodded, a fire kindling in her eyes. Mira smiled, not the cold, predatory smile she had worn that night in the hospital, but something warmer, something almost proud. She returned to the podium and looked out at the sea of faces before her. The next generation of operatives, the next line of defense against the shadows that threatened the world. "You are not just agents," she told them. "You are protectors, guardians, the last line of defense for people who will never know your names. Some of you will give everything for this mission. Some of you will question whether it's worth it." She thought of the hospital of the bullies who had mocked her, of the assassins who had underestimated her, of the organization she had brought to its knees. She thought of Nathaniel waiting for her at home, ready to build whatever future they chose together. She thought of Marcus Chen, fully recovered, back in the field, still running operations with the dry humor she had come to appreciate. She thought of the 12 agents whose lives she had saved, people she had never met, but who were alive because she had refused to back down. "It's worth it," she said finally. "Every sacrifice, every scar, every sleepless night. It's worth it because we are the ones who stand between the darkness and the light. We are the ones who protect the people who cannot protect themselves." She met the eyes of every recruit in the room. "And we never, ever give up." The room erupted in applause. And in that moment, Mira Ashford, the frail nurse who had taken down 45 killers alone, became something more than a legend. She became a symbol of strength, of resilience, of the quiet power that lies within those the world dismisses. Because the most dangerous people are not the ones who look threatening. They are the ones who look like they have nothing to offer until they prove they have everything.